Hello, and welcome back to the Critical Thinking channel. And today I was thinking about something that happened on the news actually. Um, Last night there was a report from Ukraine where it said that Ukraine had broken the ceasefire, that Russia had, said that they'd have over the Orthodox Christian Christmas. And anyway, this morning when I put the news on, it says Ukraine says Russia has broken the ceasefire. So overnight, somehow the news has reversed. And I thought, oh, propaganda. So then I thought, we need to talk about propaganda. Because I don't think you can think critically without taking into context the amount of propaganda there is out there in the media. I mean, a lot of people think propaganda is just something that used to happen during the war. Well, I believe it was kind of started around that time. I mean, just before World War One, I believe the Americans basically. I think his name was George Creel, and he got together with Woodrow Wilson, and they came up with a way to get the Germans to enter World War One. So basically, what they did was they tried to get the American population on side using lots of promotion in the media, propaganda techniques, to turn the American people from a passive, peace-loving nation into sort of warmongering, hate Germans, basically. That's what they did. They literally got the population to hate Germans by constant stream of propaganda. So, what is propaganda? I have made some notes because I haven't got a great memory. So propaganda is basically it's how the media often gives out like one side without any context. It makes a case for a goal, bypassing reason. So it conceals things which you should consider using critical thinking. So basically, they present one side of an issue as if it were absolute truth, but with no context and no alternative side. I mean, to give an example of the news, yeah, their version of giving a balanced view is to say the Ukrainians have broken the ceasefire, and then their balance is Ukrainian forces say Russia has broken the ceasefire. Well, they've got journalists there, and the journalists can be from buildings, high up or from a hill, and they can see what's happening. They can see who's firing these missiles, whether it's going towards the Russian side or from the Russian side. So they know conclusively one way or the other. So they need to why don't they just report the truth? But instead they have a caveat and say Ukrainian forces say Russians have broken the ceasefire. What's the evidence? What's true? I mean, why aren't the journalists that are there telling us? And why do they have to add that in? That's propaganda. So it makes you doubt, and it confuses the reality. I mean, obviously, none of us know what's actually going on. What I'm saying is, journalists there know, but we're not being told that they're adding this caveat. That's just an example, by the way. So it does present the issue like as if it's absolute truth. So obviously, everything we hear on the media we should question. I think basically the state is always going to, sort of show itself in a really good light. If you feed information from only one side out of context to get what you decide something to make you think, right. So basically, what they do is they this is my notes. I'm just reminding myself what I'm trying to say. So basically, the government, they want to say pass a law. So what they do is they decide the law they want to pass, and then they release all the propaganda via the media to convince people that it's a good idea, and then people think, oh, I've made that idea up. I made this up myself. I thought it's a good idea. So then the government can pass the law because it's kind of got the people's approval. But the people's approval only came with the propaganda. So it's not something that's really well thought through. We haven't really thought about the implications. Now, an example of that would be the Conservatives saying we want to get rid of human rights because it's stopping us from removing, immigrants and or illegal immigrants. Yeah, well, that's not true. Every government can remove illegal immigrants without cancelling the human rights laws, because the human rights laws protect all of us. But if they remove the human rights laws, then it's easier to destroy working rights. So therefore, you don't have to give holidays. You don't have to give people a proper job. You can just employ them as and when there's a bit of work comes in. Oh, I'll just employ them this week, but it's going to be quiet next week. We won't have them next week. So it's sort of a slippery slope into sort of how we were 100 years ago, basically. If you go back to the 1920s, before the Great Depression, people lived hand by mouth, no assets hardly, and they were kind of beholden to employers. It's a bit like the old feudal system, where we all lived under a lord and we lived in his house, but we had to pay him rent and we worked for him, and things like that. So yeah, this is about critical thinking, the behind thing. Anyway, so to put it simply, propaganda is a really big lie often. Well, the Nazis used that term, make the lie big, keep repeating it, and eventually the people will believe it. So we see this a lot in things just generally, not even, well, it is political, but it's also just to sort of shape and form how we think. So this repeated thing, America, the land of freedom, yeah? America has approximately, some debate about it, but between 3 and 4% of the world's population. They have 50%, so no, correction, I think it's 25%. So they have a quarter of all the world's prisoners. So that would be more prisoners than Russia and China combined. And China has 1.5 billion people. America has about 350 million. So just that would be shocking enough. So, land of the free? Well, debatable. Because if you put it in context, think critically about it, it's just a narrative. It's just a soundbite. It's not based on any reality. So, how does this affect democracy? Well, democracy is meant to be government by the people, yeah? So we are supposed to influence what the government do. But what's happening today is the government is selected and picked by a few super wealthy owners and corporations. Wealthy owners of corporations and banks, yeah? They decide what policies to do. Then they use propaganda to get us to sort of agree to what they've already decided to do. That's not democracy. I don't know what it is, but it's not democracy. And the reason it's important to understand how this propaganda, happens, is we all need to recognise that, because it's a really big danger. It's a danger for our freedom, for democracy, for doing the right thing. Like, some examples. There's a lot of propaganda about whether climate change is real. Yeah. Well, without sort of getting into the whole, debate about is it caused by mankind or whatever. I've been a gardener since I was 8 years old, and I'm 58, so I've been a gardener for 50 years. And I have witnessed the change in the climate in the UK. Yeah. I've seen, like now, and I saw this before even the end of December, that plants were flowering like daffodils, and the winter flowering jasmine. They were flowering before the end of December. Now, all my life, these things have flowered at the earliest. It would have been February, maybe occasionally in January. Yeah, but it would have been late January, not early January. And now they're regularly flowering in December or January, right? So the climate's changing, or has changed over the past 50 years. I've witnessed it with my own eyes, When people, say to me, oh, no, it's all false. Climate change is false. It's all an agenda to, make us all prisoners, blah, 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 whatever. Anyway, all that kind of conspiracy stuff. I just laugh because it reminds me, as some of you may remember, the program called Dallas, and there was JR and his wife Sue Ellen, and he was constantly cheating on her. Well, she caught him cheating, and he turned around and said, "It's your lying eyes, Sue Ellen." It always makes me laugh because, and that's what I feel like when people tell me global warming isn't happening. It's like you're telling me it's not happening, and I've seen it with my own eyes. But anyway, so, experience is something we should always, personal experience, we should always take that as part of critical thinking. Not all of it, but part of it. That's a priority. So if a politician, tells you we're being swamped with immigrants, think about how many immigrants live around me. How many have I seen? Well, actually, I haven't actually seen any people that could specifically be immigrants. Not in this area anyway. But I do go into town and I do see a few, yeah. But it's not quite as some politicians, put it. And I don't feel it's a great danger and it's worrying. It's, it's just people of a different culture. People like me and you, got mums and dads and families and probably want to have a great life like all of us do. So that's, that's putting in balance. So what does propaganda do? Well, basically it makes you feel or act a certain way. Yeah. So now I've got to think of an example of that. Well, for instance, let's go back to immigration. Lots of these, especially during the Brexit, we were made to feel that, in some way Europe was restricting our freedom, blah, 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 all this, But on what basis? Many of the things that we were told we couldn't do in the EU, we could, so the feelings around Brexit, about how people felt, we were being stifled in some way, blah, blah, blah. It was mainly created by propaganda. It was this false narrative, this repeated lies, repeated lies, repeated lie, repeat the lie, repeat the lie, repeat the lie. And then eventually, people think, well, it must be true. I mean, they couldn't get away with it. Well, think about the media. The stories that have come out about various people, and then they've been taken to court. The stories are proved wrong. They're lies, made up things. Yeah, and then certain celebrities, whatever, have won huge payouts. There was a WND in Iraq. Classically, it was a lie. And actually, recently I found out that I always believed there was a huge massacre in Yugoslavia, the old Yugoslavia, which is now Croatia, Kosovo, etc. But much to my horror, of course there was a conflict and people died, but apparently the UN investigators never actually found any evidence of a large-scale massacre. There was, like 30 people killed in one incident, but it was not in like the genocide that we were, it was all over the media, and I mean, I myself believed. Anyway, so going on from there, we've got the going back to the immigration for a moment. We've got the Conservatives, right, constantly promise to reduce immigration. They're basically using racism as a way to gain power. So divide people, divide and conquer. It's as old as time. So they get poorly educated people to vote against their own best interests by using this kind of us against them mentality. Yeah. So, because immigrants are just ordinary people like us, just wanting to go somewhere to make a better life, or they're refugees from the wars that most of the time the Western powers, and the UK especially, always seem to be involved with the US, has destroyed their country, made the country unsafe. It's completely ungovernable, etc. Because it's like a mafia style kind of Wild West, or whatever you want to call it. And we have done that to quite a few countries, Libya, Syria, Iraq, etc. So, yeah, they use this kind of fear of, which is basically just ordinary people coming here, for a better life, and they make out it's kind of like some sort of huge danger to us. Well, I think I'm more worried about the US going to war with China and Russia than I am for immigrants coming to Britain. But anyway, that's another part of things. But one thing I will say is that you notice that conservatives, if you look at their manifesto, one of the big promises was, we're going to cut immigration. But that actually goes against their ideological beliefs that underlie that propaganda, that lie, whatever you want to call it. Because they want to create, they've openly said they want to make Britain the Singapore of Europe. So this island on the edge of Europe, where we're going to have cheap labour, making lots of cheap products, and then export them to the rest of the world. Like this is the dream, the conservative dream. But it's not a dream for us, it's a bloody nightmare, because basically what that means is very low wages for us. And we're the sweatshop workers that are going to be working for a pittance, all the hours God sent. Like in Singapore, very little regulation, I'm going to go off on a tangent there, because regulation, that's another thing. Without regulation, human rights, going back to human rights and working rights, without that, life is miserable, as it was 100 years ago, before we all had that. I mean, we must remember that it was only in 1945, after the war, that many of the things we appreciate today came because people after the war had had enough, and they said, well, we've gone to war, we've done this, we've done that, and we've come back, and they had like nothing for the soldiers, like they do now. See soldiers homeless on the street. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So let's try and stick. So back to the political propaganda. New Labour. Now, when New Labour came to power, I did think, oh yeah, it's quite a refreshing change, blah blah blah. But then we had the whole propaganda. They called it New Labour spin, which is basically just another word for propaganda. And then we had the whole WMD Iraq. Dr. David Kelly, was he murdered? Who knows? But you've got to be open-minded to think that. That's critical thinking. Yeah. I mean, who cuts their wrists and takes an overdose? Just think about it. It's critical thinking. Anyway, so so both sides tend to, propagandize. Now, another big area is obviously business. Business will propagandize to make the best view of themselves. So we know that they call it greenwashing. A lot of companies are greenwashing. So they're highlighting their green. So like maybe they've got solar panels on the roof, and but they're not mentioning the huge amounts of pollution they cause. They're just promoting, advertising their green, their green credentials and how green they are and everything else, right? But not mentioning anything else. So with that, you got to think about everything you see from companies advertising, whatever. we've got to question it. So one of the things that recently happened to me as an example of propaganda, I mean, I don't know for sure what's going on, but I got in a conversation about on Twitter about the COVID vaccines, because as we know, there's been quite a lot of talk about side effects, especially heart problems. So I got in a conversation, put up a few posts which were genuine articles. I mean, I was posting them from the BMJ, which is the British Medical Journal, the Lancet, and there's various different things. One called there's MedX as well. And in this conversation, I had these people going, "Oh no, that's not true." But I said, "Well, if it's not true, supply me the evidence to say it's not true." I said, "This is a peer-reviewed study from the British Medical Journal or Lancet, whatever." I said, if you've got a counter peer-reviewed, so they'd come up, they're posting these memes. When you post a medical on Twitter, Facebook, you get a link and you can read the whole thing, right? They would I don't know if it was a screenshot. I wasn't sure what it was, but they were just like posting one graph or something. Yeah, but it was completely out of context. I didn't know where it was from. I didn't know. So I said, look, can you post me the link to where you got the graph from so I can read the whole thing? I can't really just take much from just a graph, or I can't really take much just from one page of an article, whatever. I said, could you supply the? Well, they never supplied the link. I don't know why, because that's what I would have done, if I wanted to sort of have a debate, whatever. Anyway, then it soon turned around into lots of name calling for me, and I was this, that, and the other, anti-vaxxer, and blah blah blah. All the normal rubbish that they come out with. But then it took a kind of interesting development, because I said that's more like a meme than it is a proper article. That's not a scientific article. It's more like a meme. And then the next thing I know, up pops a meme all about me. To be fair, it was quite funny. So it was like, we've diagnosed your problem. And then it had like a bar chart, I don't know, like sort of silliness, 75%, all these different like bar charts going down. I can't remember the whole details, and it was like my name on it and blah blah. So I thought, well, someone's just knocked that up pretty swiftly about me. If they can do that, how do I know any of these charts and posts that they've been posting have got any realism at all? They've not just made them up to back up their point of view. And then, of course, the conspiracy kind of deep, this is a little bit conspiratorial, but I then thought, well, why are these people on Facebook trying to back up vaccines? What? Why would you not just be interested in the science and try and find out what's true rather than? And I thought, well, are Big Pharma paying trolls to troll Twitter? Because how many people would actually, if they saw a chart in a meme, how many people would think, oh, that's true, okay, that explains it, and then not just turn the switch off and go, oh yeah, okay, that's it, must be true. And I don't know, it's just what I mean. But anyway, this is critical thinking. Of course, you don't go too far down the rabbit hole, but this is interesting. So that is basically, I'm sure there's things I've forgotten, but that is basically, I mean, to put it simply, I'll go back to my notes because I'm sure, yeah, that's it. That's what I was going to say. Put very simply, propaganda is a lie that's repeated over and over. And it's not just necessarily around election times, wars. It can be done in indoctrination of the whole society. For instance, if there's something, I mean, any of you out there that believe that, right, there's not enough money for us to run a proper NHS, there's not enough money for us to have decent public services, and there's not enough money for us to stop homelessness and hunger in this country, right? So I'm sure lots of you out there believe that to be true. breaking news. It's a lie, because there can never be a shortage of money, and this is the reason why. Money is not real. Money is not like a limited resource like oil or gas or coal, steel, whatever. Yeah, it's not a limited resource. Money is illusionary. It's an invention of the mind of mankind. So really think about this, because if you can get this, you can get the answers to everything you can see through the propaganda, etc. Right? So how can there be a shortage of money? It's only man-made, as is the economy, as is economics in general. Yeah, it's all man-made. So if you believe there's a shortage of money, if you believe there can be a shortage of money, then you have to believe there is a shortage of numbers. You see? How can there be? Anyway, I hope that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, with that, I'll say goodbye until next time. See you all soon. Bye-bye.